This podcast contains content related to child exploitation and criminal investigations. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The views expressed are those of the host and do not represent any official agency. All individuals discussed are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The message came in just after sunrise. I'm here, just outside. Send me a text when you're ready to come down. The man who sent it had driven hours through the night. He believed he was meeting not one, but two 14-year-old girls. What he didn't know was that the person on the other end of the chat room was me. His name was Sam Smith, and he wasn't new to law enforcement. In fact, he was a previously convicted sex offender. But that didn't stop him. He had packed a bag with condoms and underwear that he'd gotten from Walmart. He had planned every step of this trip. And he was about to learn that the only thing waiting for him was not a pair of 14-year-olds, but a pair of handcuffs. That's the danger with travelers. Offenders who don't just fantasize online, but show up at a child's door. And this is why undercover chat operations matter. I'm investigator Sean Lacy, and this is Chasing Shadows. In our first two episodes, we looked at grooming and file sharing networks. Today, we turn to something even more dangerous. The offender who moves from the keyboard to the car. Sam Smith was a convicted sex offender who traveled across state lines to meet who he believed was two underage girls. What started in an online chat room turned into an interstate crime. And what happened that day is a reminder that those aren't just conversations. They're commitments. They're action plans. And if law enforcement isn't there to intercept, the outcome can be devastating. In this episode, we'll walk through the Sam Smith case, explain briefly how undercover chat operations work, and give you, the parents, the tools to recognize the warning signs when online conversations cross the line into danger. Sam Smith's name was only unknown to me, because before my case ever began, he already had a conviction under Title 18 of the United States Code, traveling with the intent to engage in illegal sexual activity with a minor. He'd already been caught once. He'd faced consequences. But offenders like Smith rarely stopped. They adapt. They hide. They wait. And eventually, they try again. When he first entered the chat room, he wasn't shy. He didn't stumble by mistake. He gravitated towards the persona I was running, a 14-year-old girl. That's how he saw me. That's how he treated me. The chats escalated quickly. He wasn't testing the waters, he was planning. He described in graphic detail what he wanted to do. He asked about where I lived, who would be home, how much privacy I would have. He wanted certainty that he could act on his desires without interruption. Sam sent messages that left no room for doubt about his intent. He talked graphically about sexual acts. He discussed in detail the underwear that he was bringing for me. He promised gifts. And over time, he laid out his travel plans. When he would leave. When he would arrive. And how excited he was to meet me and my friend. And here's the disturbing part. This wasn't new for Sam. He admitted to me later that he'd offended before. I knew it to be true. I'd seen his prior conviction. This wasn't a man who was experimenting, he was executing on a plan. One that he'd already tried before, but hadn't gotten the message. The night before we were supposed to take Sam down, I barely slept. We had a warrant to place a ping on his phone every 15 minutes, but for hours, nothing came back that night. Each blank return raised new questions. Was Sam already on the road and trying to avoid detection? Had he figured out that this was a sting and he wasn't coming at all? Or was he planning to arrive quietly and maybe even stage an ambush? Finally, at 6:30 that morning, the first ping hit. His phone was finally active, and he was only about an hour away. It was confirmation. He was still coming, and his intent to meet two 14-year-old girls hadn't changed. As the sun came up, he began messaging again, telling me how close he was, telling me how excited he was to finally see me and my friend. And then, one more twist. He'd actually gotten lost. The printed MapQuest directions hadn't gotten him where he needed to be. And who did he stop to ask for help? Two uniformed deputies in marked patrol cars. He had no idea. He told them he was trying to find an address. The very one where he thought two 14-year-old girls were waiting on him. By mid-morning, he pulled into the target location. He took a picture of the building. He sent it to me, so excited that he found the place. He sent it to me as proof that he was there. And then he messaged, "I'm outside. Come down when you're ready." Meanwhile, at the office, we were running our final checks, loading into our unmarked cars and rolling in his direction. The takedown was quick, no resistance, no fight. When I told him that he was under arrest, he just grunted. In his car, we found exactly what he promised in the chats: the condoms, the underwear, and a bag packed for what he thought was a weekend with two children. He brought us house slippers. In the interview afterwards, he confirmed what we already knew. He admitted that he was sexually attracted to minors. He admitted that he planned to have sex with the girls who he thought were waiting on him. And then when my partner asked him what he thought should happen to someone like him, what should his punishment be, his answer still surprises me. It chills me. He said nothing. I've already been punished. When he was pressed on what he meant, he explained that his punishment was not being able to go through with what he traveled so far for. His punishment was not getting to have sex with the two 14-year-olds. In his mind, that was consequence enough. That was all the punishment he needed. That kind of thinking is terrifying, because it shows just how far removed offenders can be from reality, how warped their justification becomes. In his mind, he wasn't dangerous because, well, he didn't succeed. In reality, he was dangerous because he showed up. He drove 487 miles, fully prepared to abuse, and he believed he deserved no consequence for it. Sam Smith was taken into custody, charged, and was all set for trial. But before he had his day in court, before we had a chance to see him again, he passed away in custody from a medical condition. Some might call that an ending. Some might call it a happy ending. But the truth is that cases like this don't ever really end. The danger, the behavior, the pattern, all of those things outlive the offender. And the lessons we can learn from his case remain as urgent now as ever. Unfortunately, Sam Smith's case is only one of many where an online conversation turned into a real-world crime. And that's what makes undercover chat operations so crucial. When investigators go undercover, well, the first step is we have to be another person. We have to create a persona. We have to fabricate an online identity that looks and feels real. That means choosing a believable age, crafting a background story, paying attention to the way we type. Kids have a rhythm to their language. They use certain abbreviations. They use either too many emojis or none at all. They use a slang that some adults have never heard of. If we get it wrong, the offenders will know. They spend hours a day talking to kids. I'd made mistakes, even in training, even after training. Those slip-ups had exposed me. We spent a lot of time learning how to talk like 13 and 14-year-olds. We spent a lot of time practicing talking like 13 and 14-year-olds. We read chats. We had discussions. I went to the schools to learn how people talked, to learn how students talked. Because offenders are always testing. They always ask questions that try to trip you up. They're looking for signs that you're not really who you say you are because they're cautious that you might be the police. And most undercover chatters, most of the times when I was online, I wasn't just talking to one offender at a time. I might be talking to 4 or 5 or even have 10 conversations going. Each one needs to stay airtight. Each one needs to stay believable, consistent, authentic. Imagine trying to remember what you told one person about your family while also keeping track of what you told someone else about your school or your hobbies. That's the type of juggling act that we perform, and we don't always get it right. I remember talking to an offender about anal sex, mixing up the conversation windows and continuing that conversation in a window where the guy was asking me about softball. Boy, was he surprised. Well, that was the end of that conversation. It never starts that way, though. Offenders are trying to make you a friend. They never start with graphic talk, not the real ones. They start by testing boundaries. They'll ask, well, are your parents home? Do you have your own phone? What would they say if they heard that you were talking to someone like me? They want to know how much privacy the child has. Then comes the grooming language. Wow, you're so mature for your age. I get you in a way that no one else does. That's them positioning themselves as the only adult who really understands. Once that foundation of trust is built, that's when the escalation starts. That's when they push for photos. Sometimes, at first, very innocent. Just a selfie. But then they become increasingly explicit. They introduce sexual topics gradually, checking if the child resists. They don't want to push them away. If the child does push back a little bit, then the offender might back off temporarily, only to circle back and find another way to approach. It's a cycle of that pressure, retreat, pressure again, that ultimately does the trick. And when they think the child is ready, or if they think the child is ready, then they start moving towards the logistics of meeting. Where do you live? When are your parents gone? Can you sneak out? Do you have any friends that have cars? Can we meet? Here's what us parents need to understand. Many offenders don't stop at words. They travel. They leave their homes, get in their cars, and drive, sometimes for hours, sometimes across state lines, to meet a child they've only ever known online. That's what Sam Smith did, and he's not an outlier. We've done this dozens of times where offenders have traveled, sometimes minutes and sometimes hours, to meet us. Traveler cases are one of the most dangerous categories, in my opinion, of child exploitation. Because once a predator has invested weeks or months into grooming a child, they feel entitled to collect on that investment. And that's when the fantasy really turns into action. The lessons we learn in undercover chat operations translate directly to parenting. If trained investigators can be tested and challenged in chats, imagine how vulnerable a child is. Kids don't have the training that we have to spot manipulation. They don't have the life experiences. But parents do. They may not know when they're being groomed. To them, it feels like a friendship. To them, it feels like positive attention. And that's why conversations at home are so important. Ask your child about their online friends. Do they have contacts that they'd never met in person? Do they have contacts that you've never met in person? Do they get defensive when you ask? Are they staying up late to chat? Are they guarding their phone like it's a lifeline? Those are signs that online conversations may be more than they seem. Are they comfortable sharing those conversations with you? Maybe you can read them together. And let's remember, it doesn't take months. Some offenders move fast. In a matter of days or weeks, sometimes in the matter of hours, they can go from hello to I'm outside, come down. Just like Sam Smith did. When parents hear about some of our online chats and they talk to me about it, I often get some of the same reactions. Well, I mean, sure, but like, those things only exist online. I mean, those people would never actually do it, right? Well, Sam Smith is an example that proves that that's not totally true. He didn't just talk. He packed a bag, printed out directions, drove across state lines. He showed up in the parking lot. Would have showed up at the door, fully expecting to find two 14-year-old girls waiting for a lovely and romantic weekend. And he's not the only one. Look at the headlines. Across the country, law enforcement runs into traveling cases all the time. Men, sometimes women, who don't stop at fantasy. They move to action. Just Google it. There's dozens and dozens of these operations, successful operations that arrest offenders. The shift from chatting to traveling is one of the most dangerous points in an investigation, because up until then, it's really just words on a screen. Disturbing, disgusting, yes. Graphic, yes. Criminal, yeah. But when an offender gets in his car, when they cross a city line or a state border, they've shown intent. They've shown a different kind of intent. They've taken this thing that could be classified as fantasy, and they turn it into a plan, and then they've gone mobile. And that's why we treat traveler cases with such urgency. That's why we hold them with such a high importance, because once someone is willing to leave their home and drive to meet a child, there's no telling what they're willing to do when they get there. I'm telling you, the assumptions or the guesses that we make, incredibly disturbing. And here's something else that is important for parents to understand. Travelers don't usually stop at one attempt. If they've groomed once, they'll groom again. If they've traveled once, they'll travel again. These cases show us a pattern, a cycle of behavior that doesn't just vanish because they got caught once or because they got told no once. One of the targets I arrested, I was approached by the same person using two different profiles because I shut him down on one. But he couldn't resist. He came back around using a second profile. Remember, Sam Smith had already been convicted under federal law for traveling with the intent to abuse a minor. He'd faced consequences. He'd gone to prison. He was a federal sex offender just months before I started talking to him. That pattern tells us something vital. These offenders don't just fade away. They escalate, they repeat, they adapt, they continue. Traveling cases are where the danger becomes real world. They knock on your door. Parents need to picture it this way. Imagine your child chatting late at night with someone you've never met. Imagine that person deciding tonight to get in their car and drive to your neighborhood. Imagine them pulling up outside your house just like Sam Smith did. That's the risk. That's why we can't just dismiss these chats as just talk. Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a roadmap to your door, to your living room, to your child's innocence. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean for us as parents? Well, it means you can't just assume that someone online will just keep it on the internet. If they're grooming your child, they may be preparing to travel. And the more time and energy they invest, the more entitled they feel. Remember what Sam said, the punishment had already been received by not getting to do what he wanted to do. That's why conversations with our kids matter so much. That's why oversight matters. Because when an offender shows up in person, the stakes are no longer just emotional or digital. They're physical. They're immediate. They're dangerous. They're life-changing. They're life-changing. So what do we do? What do we do as parents? Sam Smith's case shows us that chats aren't always harmless. Sometimes they're a rehearsal for something darker. But there are warning signs that you can watch for. Again, if your child suddenly has a new online friend that they won't tell you much about, that's a red flag. If they're up late at night on the phone chatting with someone you don't know, that's a red flag. If they have some old devices of yours in their room where you find them, that's a red flag. They hide their screen, delete messages immediately, get defensive when you ask questions, all red flags. If a relationship with someone online escalates too quickly, going from, well, I just met him, to boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend in a matter of days, that's a red flag. If you can't talk to them on the phone or on video, but maybe your child has, that's a red flag. Where do these things happen? Man, everywhere. Predators go where kids are. That means popular apps like Snapchat, Discord, Instagram, TikTok. But it also means some lesser known apps like Kik, Whisper, or chat rooms like Pal Talk. The rule is simple. If there's a chat feature, there is a risk. Monitoring is important, but more important than monitoring is conversation. Kids need to know that they should never meet or give their address to some person who they only know online. Stranger danger. Where has that gone? They should never share their personal details like their school or their schedule. And they should always come to you if someone makes them feel uncomfortable, no matter what was said, no matter what they shared. Because the sooner that law enforcement can get involved, the easier it is for us to catch the predator. Here's the most important part. They need to know they won't get in trouble for telling you. Offenders use shame and fear to keep kids silent. Kids use shame and fear on themselves to keep themselves silent, to prove to themselves that this is the right choice because they don't want to get in trouble. You fight that shame and that fear by making your home the safest place to tell the truth, by making you the safest person to tell. And finally, if you ever suspect grooming or a travel situation, don't handle it alone. Save the evidence, take the screenshots, and if you can, report it immediately to the cyber tip line at NCMEC. Or call your local law enforcement. Most agencies have someone, just like me, specially trained to handle these types of cases. These reports to NCMEC, to law enforcement, they save kids. Because if they're doing it with your kid, they're doing it with others. Sam Smith proves that we can stop offenders like this before they find an actual child's doorstep. It's a reminder that these chats aren't just digital. They don't just exist on the internet. For some offenders, these conversations are the first step towards the doorstep. This is the opening and the opportunity that they've been waiting for. Sam knew the risks. He'd done this before. Yet still he packed a bag and traveled. He was escalating back to hands-on offenses and would have succeeded had we not intervened. That's why these types of operations exist. We place ourselves in positions to intercept those offenders. But the bigger lesson is this, that us parents, we need to know what is happening on our child's devices. We need to understand the apps that they use, the friends that they talk to, and those red flags that are waving that tell us when a conversation is inappropriate and has the potential of crossing the line. Because we've proved it. Travelers aren't myths. They're real. They're out there. We've proved it time and time again. Departments across this country have proved it time and time again. We got to get them out of the shadows. In our next episode, we're going to take a look at one of the platforms where these conversations take place, where the conversation with Sam Smith took place. Pal Talk. It's a chat room service that's been around for years, and while most people had never heard of it, predators have. We'll break down how it works, why it's risky, and what you need to know if it's on your child's device. I'm Investigator Sean Lacy, and this has been Chasing Shadows. Thank you for listening, and thank you for standing with me in this fight.